Pushkin was the OG. He was black. He rhymed his verses and he was shot in a gunfight. Very intuitive in the feeling of the language, almost elusively easy to read. It can be done better and national genius of Russian literature. But Pushkin got embarrassed and ran away. Hello everyone, it's a free translator, a poetry podcast. My name is Danya Kosякov and here I translate and discuss masterpieces of Russian poetry. And today we're gonna talk about the most famous love poem from the most famous Russian poet of all time, Alexander Púshkin, I Loved You Once. It's not easy to talk about Pushkin at all. He is so big, so influential. Tons of literature written about his style and his themes, and it's pretty challenging to create something from my own perspective in just short format in 20 minutes. How could I fit all Pushkin in it? But I'll try, and I'll start with my translation of his short masterpiece, and later on we'll discuss his life, his influence on Russian literature, and my own perception of it. So let's start with the poem itself. I loved you once. The love of mine, it may be, within my soul has faded not in all. But let it bother you for no more, let it. I do desire to sadden you with naught. I loved you once, so hopelessly, so stilly. Oh jealousy, oh dither had me quelled. I loved you once, so honestly, so dearly, as God grants you to be loved by someone else. This miniature of Pushkin is widely considered as one of the most stunning Russian love poems of all time, and I've heard that in translation this charm of genius is disappearing suddenly. I've read dozens of translations of that piece and I still decided to do my own. There was no actual need to translate it, but I still did it. And this even feels like some challenge for a translator because the poem is so short and images here are perfectly fit, and how can you just take it from one language into another, trying to save all of that beauty. My work is underlining the sound of it first, and of course I'm trying to be accurate, close to the actual meaning. We'll discuss it a bit later, and first of all, let's have a brief talk about Pushkin, national genius of Russian literature. Pushkin can be compared to Shakespeare from English literature, to Dante from Italian and Goethe from German. He is the founder of modern Russian literature language. His style is clear, elegant, and can be easily understood by the modern reader, except for some early antique experiments. Pushkin in Russian culture is a canonized celebrity till today. A typical Russian city will have a Pushkin street for sure, and every Russian has heard the proverb, "Who will do the work instead of you? Pushkin, maybe." This refers to the common knowledge that all of the good things should be somehow associated with him. Many Russian poets and writers were literally praying over his works. And I am personally obsessed with comparing these poets in my head, mental tier lists of some sort, and Pushkin is a very tough fighter. One-on-one, some of the greatest Russian poets of 20th century can have a close fight with Pushkin, but he has created his masterpieces without any shoulders to stand, which is even more impressive. How could he create all of that perfections without Pushkin of his own? Well, this is crazy. Pushkin was born in June of 1799, and it shows how young Russian literature actually is. 200 years only separate us from the greatest poet that has lived in it. Pushkin's great-grandfather was actually born in Africa and then was captured and brought to Russia when he became a Russian nobleman. So Pushkin received pretty dark skin and curly hair from his African ancestor, which is not what Slavic people see very often. And that also originated the modern joke that Pushkin was the OG, he was black, he rhymed his verses and he was shot in a gunfight. Well, that is sort of the image Pushkin receives in the modern culture, because again, he is remembered much more than any other Russian poet, and even random dude on the street in Russia have heard his name at least. Pushkin was born in a noble but not a very rich family. Still, he got lucky. He was able to obtain an excellent education in the Russian Imperial Lyceum. It was elite Russian private school organized for the emperor's children, where they were planned to be educated with other kids from noble families. Sort of boarding school for the top elite of Russian Empire. In the end, the emperor's family decided to provide home education for their children. But other noble families have had a chance to offer the respectful education for their offspring in the Lyceum. Luckily, Pushkin was one of these kids. He graduated in a first wave of students from that Lyceum. And this boarding school brotherhood remained a major role in his life. Pushkin started writing poetry as a teen, and during the final exams he even declared some of his works in front of the best Russian 18th century poet, Gavrilo Державин. Державин asked for the young talent to greet him face to face, but Pushkin got embarrassed and ran away. After graduating from the Lyceum, Pushkin started his life in St. Petersburg, at the time the capital of Russian Empire. Soon he became the best, the superstar of Russian poetry. His talent was acknowledged by noble people all over the country, and he was considered as something exceptional to his time. He adapted a lot of French words. He knew French very well, and this style got him troubles with the conservative party in Russian literature, who were arguing against the foreign influence on the language. Pushkin made a lot of jokes about them. He's got both the sense of humor and confidence in his style. Pushkin wrote numerous poems and dramas and novellas even. He was a significant prose writer as well. All of that had a major influence on Russian literature, language, and culture. Pushkin also have founded the literature magazine Contemporary. He created a scene for major Russian authors to shine on. He was very active and vital, not only in literature, but in social life of Russian Empire. He had complicated personal relationships with Russian emperors. Several times he got exiled from the capital for his political views and statements. These reclusive times were very productive though. He wrote a lot of excellent poetry in exile. And late Pushkin is a separate mark of quality. In his last year, Pushkin made some insane spiritual poetry, clear and stunning. Late Pushkin is the most worthy interlocutor in a history of Russian literature. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. Star of Russian poetry was killed in a duel by a French officer, Dantes. Pushkin was only 37 years. Rumors were that the duel was initiated by his enemies in high society. Pushkin died as a hero, and after his death he was quickly named the national genius of Russia. He has created a lot of works that match this status. And a short story for you to weight the presence of Pushkin in our culture. When I lived in Kazan, in the capital of Russian minority Tatars, there was an opera theater in the center of the city, and from the one side of it there was a statue of Pushkin, and it was written Pushkin, and from the other side it was the statue of Tatars' most famous poet, Tukay, and it was written only Tukay. So yeah, the symbolism is obvious. Tukay is our Pushkin. So there is a place for Pushkin, and it has to be national Pushkin for every respectful minority in Russia. Straight comparison and straight symbolism in the buildings and in statues and so on. It was funny for me to catch this idea, and I was like, yeah, good of you, Tatars. To translate Pushkin to English is pretty hard. His style is airy, very intuitive in the feeling of the language, almost elusively easy to read. He's almost speeding up while being read, whirling and attracting us down with the steam of his poetry. Pushkin was very smart and attentive and had a very good taste. Also, the son of the Russian poetry is not called the son with no reason. He was very vital, very generous, very noble. And overall, Pushkin was the genius that can't be fully explained, but can be felt and acknowledged by the majority of Russian leaders. So what I've tried to do with Pushkin's masterpiece in my translation is to keep it in the same rhythmical form, also to keep the original metaphors in, and not to add anything from myself. Also very important. Pushkin is the icon. We cannot add something from ourselves to it. And my translation that I'm showing to you is 9th or 10th edit, because my first one was not so perfect, and I'm like, yeah, I can translate that. I know Russian, I know English, I can do it. But then no, actually, wait a minute. It can be done better. And Pushkin is the poet that challenges you the most. No time when I could say I've understood him well enough. Pushkin is bottomless. Let's read it again, step by step, and I will highlight something important. I loved you once, the love of mine it may be, within my soul has faded not in all clear here? But let it bother you for no more, let it. I've repeated, let it in the end, to avoid adding something from myself. Literal translation goes, but let it bother you for no more. And there is still a space, and what I should add? How could I fix the rhythmical issue? And I was trying, and I was, no, I'm adding something. No, it's not good. Pushkin said only that, and then, I can repeat. It sounds not perfect in Russian. It fits perfect in a line, but okay, it is better than adding something from myself. That's my point. I do desire to sadden you with naught. This word not is in the right place here. I'm glad I saved it in my final variant. I loved you once so honestly, so stilly. Or jealousy, or dither had me quelled. And this is the line that's very interesting in sound. Or jealousy, or dither. In Russian, it's то робостью, то ревностью, томим. And these vowels in that line in Russian repeat the order of vowels in the notes of piano. Do, re, mi. And it was used in Russian to describe the variety of feelings like do, re, mi. All of the possible notes are included in description of the feeling. And this is insane formal idea. For Pushkin to understand it that deep, well, I've read this poem numerous amount of times. I've learned it by heart in school, and I've never thought that this is a ciphered do, re, mi in here. Maybe it's not his original idea, maybe it's not his intention, but the fact that these notes appeared here is just like, whoa. And I think Pushkin realized what he has done here. And I've tried to make it in English, something like that. Or jealousy, or dither. Something like do, re, do, mi. Well, of course it couldn't be translated with that elegancy, but I tried. I tried to keep it and keep the form as well. So то робостью, то ревностью, or jealousy, or dither had me quelled. And the ending, I loved you once so honestly, so dearly, as God grants you to be loved by someone else. Another stunning formal idea is hidden in these lines, and to explain it, I'll start with something more clear. Pushkin enjoyed playing with readers' expectations. He had the famous joke from his major novel and verse, Yevgeny Onegin, where two Russian words that are cliché in rhyming, roses, which goes rozy, and frosts, which are in Russian morozy. Very convenient and very cliched rhyme. Pushkin says, after using the rhymes froze, morozy, he goes, the reader waits for the rhyme roses, here take it faster as you can. So he was openly playing on that kind of formal jokes in his novel and verse, but here the idea is hidden a bit more deep. He finishes the poem with the word someone else, other one. In Russian, it is the short form of the adjective другим. one word. It rhymes with the short form of another adjective. In my translation, it is be quelled, but in original, it's tamim. And as the Russian reader sees the word tamim 2 lines before the end, he expects the word beloved, любим, to meet the rhyme at the end. But here is the magic part. Pushkin uses the word любим, beloved, but not in a strong position. He places it in front of the rhyme, beloved by someone else. He literally places the other rhyme, failing the expectation as the expectations were failed in the relationship he describes in the poem. And this other rhyme for replacement of the rhyme любим is the word someone else. Another rhyme, which is the rhyme another. Well, that is crazy. I didn't see it myself, but I should mention it after I've known it from the respectful source. And of course, these expectancies can't be fully translated into English. But still, I think it's very important to keep the structure intact and finish the poem with the exact words someone else, even if it will sound a bit heavier in English, I guess, while in Russian it sounds as smooth as the sleigh ride on a snow vastness, some typical Russian winter landscape, I don't know, so natural. Let's even hear the original and the translation mixed together to see how accurate I'm trying to translate the sound, Russian and English combined. Let's go.
Я вас любил, да любовь еще, быть может, в душе моей угасла не совсем. But let it bother you for no more. Let it. I do desire to sadden you with the naught. I loved you once so hopelessly, so stilly, or jealousy, or dither had you quelled. I loved you once so honestly, so dearly, as God grants you beloved by someone else.
At the end, I believe some theory of translation is going to be formed here during this podcast. I expect from the translation not to imitate the easiness or other gears that the original piece evokes in the language. That is just not translatable and should not be imitated with the bland or unproven linguistic approaches of the translator. What should be done instead is the formal resemblance, yes, the sound structure, yes, and the originality of the semantics. I do not dare to add anything from myself to the great Pushkin. I'd better use plug words, empty words, or even repetitions just for the rhythm than the semantically charged word that didn't exist in the original. The result may be sharp and a bit unnatural for the English ear, but that's what an honest translation should sound like to me. I don't want it to be blend into the English poetry tradition completely. Let it be an English written collection of works that offer close to the literal translation of the Russian origin, as the curly hair of Alexander Púshkin retains his African roots, which doesn't stop anybody from calling him a Russian genius of poetry. That's it for today. I was finally able to step over Alexander the Great of Russian literature, Alexander Púshkin. Next time we'll have the long translation of mine, one of the greatest Russian poetical statements of the 20th century, Elegia by Alexander Vitensky. This Alexander Pushkin's I Loved You Once translation will be in a text in the description of the episode as usual. My name is Danya Kosякov. This was a major free translator podcast. We keep going on and reminding to ourselves, life passes, but the poetry remains.